So yesterday we saw in Perek Gimel, Mishnah Gimel and Daled some of the differences between Ma'ot and Perot shel Ma'aser Sheni. And today the Mishnah continues in Mishnayot Hey and Vav to discuss these differences. So Ma'ot nichnasot liyushalayim v'yotzot. Coins of Ma'aser Sheni can enter Yerushalayim and be taken out again. Uperot nichnasin ve'enan yotzin. But produce may only be brought in, but not taken out again. So the Tanna Kama is saying that the a fundamental difference between money and produce, which is that once produce enters the walls of the old city of Jerusalem, they cannot come out again. They cannot be redeemed inside of Jerusalem. They have to be eaten inside of Jerusalem. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, af hapirot nichnasin v'yotzin. Produce may also be brought in and taken out again. And the Rishalmi and the commentators note that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is not completely disagreeing with Tanna Kama, but he's talking about a specific case Bartanura talks about, specifically that you can take food out to grind them or to bake them and afterwards return them to Jerusalem. That is, the produce needs to be eaten in Jerusalem. That is a halacha d'oraita. The produce can only be cannot be redeemed once it has entered Jerusalem. The Tanna Kama and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel agree about that as well. But the question is specifically, can the produce exit Jerusalem and then come back into Jerusalem and be eaten again? And that is where Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel allows that. Bartanura says there are a lot more opportunities, cheaper opportunities to grind produce and to bake produce outside of the old city of Jerusalem than inside the old city of Jerusalem. So this would be allowed. The idea that the mechanism for how the produce cannot exit Jerusalem is mentioned in the Bartanura. Ein hamechitzot koltot ma'ot kederach shekoltot perot. The walls of Jerusalem retain the produce. Once the produce comes in, the walls are sort of just keeping the produce in, and they've sort of captured the produce, but they haven't really captured money. And we'll see this concept of mechitzot koltot in future Mishnahs. So the Mishnah goes further in Mishnah Vav regarding this idea that once produce has entered Jerusalem, it cannot leave again, or it needs to, Ma'aser Sheni produce needs to be eaten in Jerusalem. So perot shenigmara malachtan, the avru b'toch Yerushalayim, produce whose processing was completed and it passed through Jerusalem. So recall from the beginning of Masechet Masrot that in order for a produce to be liable for Maaser, it needs to have a gemar malacha. It needs to finish its processing. And so here we're talking about produce that has finished its processing, so it's liable for Maaser. In which case it's tevel. You have produce. It contains future Ma'aser Sheni, but it hasn't been separated. And the Mishnah is saying once it has passed through Jerusalem. Yachzor Ma'aser Sheni shelahem v'ye'achal b'Yushalayim. Once you separate that Ma'aser Sheni from the tavel, it needs to go back into Jerusalem and be eaten there. It cannot be redeemed. You can't redeem it for money. It needs to go in because it has physically entered the walls of Jerusalem. The shalonik bara malachtan. Now, what about produce that has not completed its processing? So it's not even tevel yet. Because it's not even liable for Ma'aser Sheni, such as salei anavim lagat v'salei tenim lamuktzeh. So such as baskets of grapes that are going to the wine press, or baskets of figs that are going to a drying place to be turned into cakes of figs. There's a machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai says Yachzor Ma'aser Sheni shelahem v'yachal b'Yushalayim. Beit Shammai requires those figs, once they have been processed and once the Ma'aser Sheni has been separated, to return to Yerushalayim. Beit Hillel omrin yipadeh v'yachal b'chol makom. It can be redeemed and eaten anywhere. We have the Mishnah presents a different version of this debate from Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda mer mishum Rabbi Yossi. Lo nechluchu Beit Shammai u'Beit Hillel al perot shelo nigbara malachtan. Sheyipadeh Ma'aser Sheni shelahem v'yachal b'chol makom. No, the argument between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai is not they don't argue about unprocessed produce. In that case, everybody agrees that you can redeem them and eat them anywhere. What were they arguing? They're arguing about produce that has finished, that's been processed. Shammai omrim yachzor Ma'aser Sheni shelahem v'yachal b'Yushalayim. Beit Hillel omrim yipadeh v'yachal b'chol makom. So Beit Shammai says it needs to go back. Even if it was just passing through when it was in the state of tevel, Beit Hillel omrim, you can eat it wherever. And in both of these cases, no matter whichever way the machloket goes, the Mishnah adds v'had demai, and if it is doubtful Ma'aser Sheni, nichnas v'yotzeh v'nifdeh, it can be brought in and then taken out again and redeemed. So next, the Mishnah is going to switch topics and discuss boundary cases, specifically geographic boundary cases. So recall that we've seen over here, but based on the walls of Jerusalem constitute an important boundary, halakhic boundary, because outside of the walls of Jerusalem you may redeem Ma'aser Sheni for money, and inside the walls of Jerusalem, the Ma'aser Sheni the Ma'aser Sheni can only be eaten inside of the walls of Jerusalem. So the question then becomes, well, how do you define the walls of Jerusalem? So ilan shehu omed bifnim uvenetra lachutz, o omed bachutz v'netra lifnim. So a tree whose roots are inside Jerusalem but has branches outside, or vice versa. How do you figure out whether it's inside the wall or outside the wall? Mikeneged choma lifnim kalifnim, mikeneged choma lachutz kalachutz. So branches that are outside, you basically draw a dotted line based on the wall, and wherever you are in that tree, you are inside or outside the walls of Jerusalem. And so if you're sitting on one branch, you could eat Ma'aser Sheni. If you're sitting on the other branch, you may redeem Ma'aser Sheni. So an olive press that have an entrance within and an inner space outside, or vice versa. So there's an entrance on one side of the wall, but then there's sort of a cavity on inside or outside of the city. Beit Shammai omrim hakol klifnim. Beit Shammai says we treat it as though it is inside, and so it has all of the chumrot of being inside the city. Beit Hillel omrim miknei choma klifnim mikeneged hachoma lachutz kalachutz. And so Beit Hillel says, no, we draw a line wherever the wall is, and wherever you are according to the wall, then you are inside or outside. So the Mishnah next does a sort of short digression, since we're talking about these boundary cases, to discuss the Beit HaMikdash. And so in this case, we're talking about the differences in holiness between Har Habayit and the Azara. So the temple mount versus the temple courtyard. And this is relevant for because somebody who is in a state of tumah cannot enter the Azara. And there are certain sacrifices that can only be eaten inside of the Azara. And so there's a question of what constitutes the Azara versus the Har Habayit. And so just very quickly, halishachot, so chambers, b'niyot b'kodesh uftuchot lachol. So kodesh in this case means Azara, chol relatively is the Har Habayit. Tochan chol v'gagotehem kodesh. So chambers that are built on the Har Habayit, but are that are built inside the Azara, but are open out to the Har Habayit. Their inside is considered as Har Habayit, v'gagotehen kodesh, and their rooftops, as long as the rooftop is on the surface of the courtyard, so on the same level as the courtyard, is considered this is considered kodesh. So you have to imagine that this is built on a mountain, and so the roof may be on the same level as the Azara, but the opening would be sort of below it. Vice versa, b'niyot b'chol v'tuchot lakodesh tochan kodesh v'gagotehen chol. So the vice versa, if we go according to the opening, the opening, b'niyot b'kodesh v'chol ufutuchot lakodesh lachol, but something that has entrances and cavities both in the chol and in the kodesh. Tochan v'gagotehem mikeneged hakodesh lakodesh. Mikeneged hachol lachol, we draw a dotted line, and whatever is on one side is considered chol, and the other side is considered kodesh. And so this concludes this section of this small sugya around boundary cases. Tomorrow we'll pick up with the next few Mishnayot that deal with questions of tumah v'tahara in relation to Ma'aser Sheni.